Hey guys, it's Casey and welcome back to the channel. So President Trump has signed the PPP extension bill on Saturday, right after it had expired. Now, he did that because it extends the deadline for the Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses to be able to receive federal funding. Now, the bill extends the deadline up to August 8th, and it is set to pretty much assist businesses that were significantly impacted by the closures related to the coronavirus. And who wasn't impacted? Everyone was impacted. It expired on Tuesday night with roughly over $130 billion left unused. I'll say that again, $130 billion. Well, Congress said, that's not good. We got to get this money out. And so the Senate, in a surprise move, they passed the legislation by unanimous consent late Tuesday, which extended the program just hours before it was set to expire. Now, the lending program was established by the $2 trillion stimulus package negotiated by the White House and approved by congressional leaders back in the end of March. That was right after we incurred all of the coronavirus pandemic. All of the businesses were being closing down. All of the people were being laid off, and it was just a complete mess. And so Congress stepped in along with the president and the Federal Reserve, and they rolled out the CARES Act. And part of that was the Triple P, I like to call it, and so that small businesses could receive funding and stay afloat. Now, the program did experience a very chaotic rollout, but it's been very popular. As a matter of fact, the SBA has lent out more than $520 billion in emergency loans to more than 4.8 small businesses. Now, it hasn't gone out without a hitch. What has occurred is that a lot of the small businesses wanted to go back, or I should say went back, to apply for a second round of the funding, knowing that there was additional funds left into the pool, and the government denied them. And so it was very tough because when small businesses said that, hey, we need additional funding, the government pretty much said, well, you've already received it. We're not going to allow you to double dip back into the pool. And then since the bill was set to expire and there was so much more money left over, the government extended the deadline date for additional small businesses to come in, and then they also loosened the requirements so that existing small businesses who have already received funding can get a second round. So that's a positive news. Now keep in mind this extension comes as lawmakers on Capitol Hill are still preparing for negotiations over the next round of coronavirus stimulus. This is very important because everyone is still waiting on a finalized approval from Congress and the White House that we will be receiving a second round of stimulus, which also includes stimulus checks. As of right now, it's considered to be a foregone conclusion, but anyone's guess as of right now. So House Democrats did pass a $3 trillion stimulus bill back in May that included aid for state and local governments and another round of $1,200 direct payments to Americans. But the measure gained very little traction in the GOP-controlled Senate. That was up until July 2nd, when the unemployment numbers came out that I mentioned in my previous video that showed that while June unemployment numbers were a little bit lower, they only accounted for the unemployment numbers in the middle of June, and in the later parts of June, the unemployment began to spike again because we were having a second round of coronavirus outbreaks throughout a lot of states, my state, Texas included. So that's when the GOP stepped in and said, okay, we need to get a deal done. And they, as of right now, they are on recess until July 4th until July 18th. And then at that point, they will come back and we will get hopefully something done. Now, the White House before this point also pumped the brakes on the stimulus because they too wanted to see exactly how the stimulus already signed into law played an impact into the economy. And they've rolled over. The president came out last week and said that he is well on board with the second stimulus check. He's also stated he's on board with the second stimulus package as a whole. And so at this point, we're just flat out waiting. Now, Trump also did say in an interview with Fox Business on Wednesday, he reiterated his support for another round of payments. He's a big advocate over it, and at this point, it's just a pure waiting game. I do want to discuss with you guys some of the PPP loan guidelines. We won't go into detail about it, but I just want to cover some high-level things so that you guys are aware as to what exactly it is that employers are required to do. And so in case if something happens and you are aware of your company getting the PPP program protection, then you can ensure that they're staying within the guidelines. Now, they are required, now keep in mind that they are required to apply the PPP funds for payroll, for mortgage interest, for rent, and utilities. They also are allowed to provide up to 24 weeks of coverage for eligible expenses. So That's more of like a business thing than it is actually an employee thing. But just pretty much any kind of expenses that they incurred over the 24 weeks is eligible. They also are required to do a 60-40 rule. So they basically means that of all of the funds that they receive, 60% of that has to be applied towards the payroll costs. And that's payments to independent contractors. That's not included, which is a little unfortunate because you are being paid by the company to do a service, but I guess because you're not technically an employer, that's kind of unfortunate because you are paid by the company to do a service, but I guess because you're not technically an employee, that doesn't count. Also, staffing requirements. They are required to maintain the number of employees on their payroll that they had before pre-COVID-19. So there's a certain calculation that they use to determine that, but basically they do have employee number requirements on that. There are some exemptions on rehiring employees. So if they made a written offer, and let's say if a person didn't accept that, then that doesn't count. Also, if they were fired for a certain cause, then that doesn't count. If people voluntarily resigned, that doesn't count. But let's say if someone was offered to be rehired and by the same wage and numbers and they received that, then that counts as the 60-40 rule as to putting their money towards their existing employees. They are also required to maintain at least 75% of the total salary. So this requirement will be individually assessed for every employee that did not receive more than $100,000 in annualized pay in 2019. So basically, if you didn't receive more than that, then they're required to maintain 70% of your total salary that you had pre-COVID-19, which I think is great because then that means they can't get federal money and then decide to shortchange you and then pocket the rest. There's also a rehiring grace period. So they can rehire any staff that were laid off or put on furlough. So they can rehire any staff that were laid off or put on furlough and reinstate any pay that was decreased by more than 25% to meet the requirements for the forgiveness. If those changes were made due to COVID-19 between the February 15th and 28th, they qualify. Keep in mind that they have until December 31st to do so, but that doesn't really matter to this point. Just know that they have up until the end of the year in order to meet their guidelines for that. So if they do all of this, basically the federal funds will be completely forgiven and they will owe nothing. Now, the very interesting thing about this is that I read a news article a little earlier today that stated that a lot of the big companies actually applied for this loan, that they're not small businesses, and for one reason or another, they received PPP funding. I don't know why, but they did. And so Congress is looking into that to see if they should have received it and if they have to pay it back, or if it was just they found a loophole in the program that allowed them to get some additional funding. Not that they need it, but it got covered. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's the latest. This is very important news because this was a component of the original CARES Act. And so this shows that Congress is now beginning to approve the key things that are needed and that need to be renewed for the second HEROES Act that is probably going to be approved here in the next week or two. So I know that everyone is waiting very patiently. I'm totally with you. I am as well. And I do think that your patience is going to be well rewarded here. As soon as Congress comes back off of recess at the end of next week, I think that we're going to see some very positive feedback get hit. We might even see some positive feedback before then if they have a deal reached, an agreement verbally, but just isn't yet signed into law yet. We could have very well received some news or information maybe even this week, maybe even the next week. But whenever that does occur, know that you guys will receive it here first. I will make sure to upload a video on that, cover all the details, cover all the information that goes over what that plan is going to entail. I'm not going to waste you guys a lot of time talking about what we anticipate is going to be in that. I've already done a couple of videos on that, but just know that when we do get additional information on that, on the stimulus package and what those details are going to entail, you guys will get it here first. So if you haven't already, please make sure that you like, subscribe to the channel, that you like the video, and also comment as well. I love to hear you guys' comments about this. I know that there's a lot of videos on YouTube and online about this. A lot of the same videos are kind of covering the same things because there's only limited information about it. But I do want to get you guys' idea and get your opinion on, do you think that we need a second stimulus package? I would assume that 99% of you guys do, but if you don't think that we need one, I'd like to hear your comments in the section below. And if you guys haven't already, please make sure you check out my previous stimulus package videos. In those, I go over two things mostly. One, I go over the details that were approved back in the middle of May that cover all of the details for the package that the Senate approved. And then I also go over the details that were in that package and which ones I think are going to be transferred over to the new second improved package that's upcoming in the next week or two. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you tune in and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.